Hey folks, it's RBB. I'm back with an After Effects tutorial. I know it's been a hot minute. I need to get on some kind of schedule. I do like a video a day for 20 days and then nothing for 3 weeks. So today's going to be on After Effects, and we looked the other day at how to look at the graphic user interface, basically a really brief overview of After Effects. Today we're going to look at how to set up a composition and how to render. This is a video that I will for sure direct my students to when they say, how do I do this? When we've talked about it 100,000 times. This is going to go over real quickly, setting up a new composition and then rendering that composition. So if you remember compositions inside a project, an Adobe After Effects project is like a big bucket. It's a container. And inside that container, that project, we can have lots of compositions. The composition might be your footage that's all edited out. It might be a complicated effects scene. It could be, you could have a composition that is your motion media, like your titles moving around. So you could have lots of little components and parts that go into a project. So you might have more than one composition. But let's say I need a new composition. If you just start up After Effects, you'll see there's a big button right here in the middle that says New Composition. You can click that to make a new composition. But if you're already in After Effects and you've already been doing some stuff and you need a new composition, you go up to Composition and say New Composition. You can also say Control N for those of you who love the hotkeys, right? Control N. So whether I smash that big button here that says New Composition, say Composition, New Composition, or Control N, it's all going to bring up this same menu. So just to review this again, our composition name is whatever we're working on. If we're working on title sequence or magic wand explosion, whatever it is we're working on in this setting, in this composition, we want to name it. So let's say this is my title underscore sequence. Remember to put an underscore instead of spaces just to get in the habit of doing it, because a lot of programs like Maya, the more complicated programs get, the less they like things like spaces. It means something different to them. So yeah, get in the habit of using an underscore instead of a space. Okay, so we've got our composition name. We're going to stick in this Basics tab. If you need the Advanced tab or the 3D Render tab, you're probably not watching this video because you're not this basic in After Effects. So we're going to stick to the Basic tab. Our first thing is our presets here, which is HD, high definition, 1920 by 1080, which is standard 2K. So 2K, widescreen, 16 by 9, anybody that says something like that, HD, they probably mean the same thing. 1920 pixels by 1080 pixels is standard 2K 16 by 9 widescreen. Okay, we have other choices. We've got lots of choices. We've got ultra high definition, which is 4K, or 8K, ultra high definition, 7,000 pixels. Yeah, we don't need that. First of all, nobody would be able to watch it at that rate. So even if you made a 4K video, unless somebody has a monitor or a device that they can see 4K, they're still only going to see 2K because their monitor is 2K. So keep that in mind. It's not like, ooh, look how bougie I am. I'm doing 8K. No one will be able to see it at that resolution. It'll still be 2K. We have social media ones, lots of different things. Again, this is sort of out of our pay grade. We don't care about this stuff right now. Why we have 3 right here is at 24 FPS, which is frames per second, 25 frames per second, or 2997 frames per second. We can set this number to whatever we're told. There are standards, 24, 25, 2997, 30, 60. Those are all sort of standard frame rates. All right, so if we're doing, say, animation, let's stick to 24 frames per second. So that's the only difference in these is high definition, widescreen, 1920 by 1080, it's 2K at 24 frames per second, meaning that 24 individual images are going to flash on the screen in 1 second. Here it's 25, okay? Here it's 29.97. And there's a reason for that we're not going to cover right now, okay? So this is our frame rate. We're going to pick 24 frames per second. We see it's 1920 by 1080. The height is 1920 by 1080. It's 16 by 9. 4:3. If you ever see that, that's old school television. That's almost square. We're leaving our pixels square. Our frame rate is at 24. Good. That's what we told it to do. Resolution is full. because we're not doing anything that we would need to sort of dumb it down. If we had some really complicated effects and tracking and we're really asking After Effects to do a lot of stuff, we might want to work at a lower resolution so it doesn't lag, but we're not doing anything so fancy, so we're going to leave it at full. And the time code, very important. The time code is how long is our composition, and it starts at 0. For the most part, you're always going to start at 0. There are reasons not to, but again, we don't care. So we are starting at 0 in base 24. Base, that's going to be like a middle school flashback of base numbers. It's important to understand the time code and what frames per second mean. We count in base 10, right? We say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then when we say 10, we're actually saying 10, 1, 10, and 0 ones. Okay, then we go 1, 10, and 1, 1 is 11. 1, 10, and 4 ones is 14. So we count in base 10. We tell time in base 60. So we have 59 seconds, and then 60 seconds is 1 minute, right? 60 minutes is 1 hour. So we have base 60. We use base numbers all the time. So while it seems like a middle school flashback, and when do we ever use this? You use it all the time. But here, if we're doing something in animation or in video, if we're working in base 24, that means that 24 images will show on the screen in 1 second. And rather than counting by 24s forever, when we get to 24, it rolls over to 1 second. And then the 24 starts again. So 1 second and 2 frames, 3 frames, 4 frames, 5 frames, blah, 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 22, 23, 2 seconds. Okay? So every time this rolls to 24, it bumps up a second. So if you understand that, this part of the time code here, this is how long is our composition going to be. Now this probably looks, when you glance at it, like it's 6 minutes long, but that's not how the time code works. The time code is hours, minutes, seconds, and not milliseconds, frames. So this is actually 6 seconds and 0 frames. Okay? So I have lots of people that will turn in something and they've got a 30 right here and they think it's set for 30 seconds and they're freaking out because it's flashing by in a blink of an eye, because 30 frames is really 1 second and 6 frames. Okay, so this time code right here, hours, minutes, seconds, and frames, is only 6 seconds and 0 frames long. Our background color is black. It's just infinite blackness. There's not a color card or anything. And we can say, okay, and we would set up our composition. And here is our composition. It is 6 seconds long. Okay, we see that we have one called title sequence here at 24 frames per second. And up top in our project window, we are looking at this composition, which says title sequence 1920 by 1080. And its delta, its change, goes from 0 to 6 seconds at 24 frames per second. Great. Now we're ready to do our magic. That's not what this video is about. We're not about doing anything here. So I went ahead and I made another little composition here called practice render. Okay. And I just made this simple ball. Okay, I just did some thing here. So we've got something to render. And we're going to look at how to render now. When your project is done, so let's say this is my project, this awesome animation here. And I am ready to render this. I need to look at where my render, when I'm done. So my little ball here goes off screen at, and I can look over here, I am at 4 seconds and 20 frames. I don't want to cut it off right there, probably. Okay, we want what's called heads and tails. So I want a little time before my action starts and a little time after my action starts so that I can, fade in or fade out and have a little wiggle room. If I need to change the time of my composition, remember I set my composition for 6 seconds, and here it is, 6 seconds. If I need to change my time, it's very easy. I can simply go up to composition, composition settings, okay, right here, Control K, and it will show me my composition settings for practice setup render, which is the name of this composition. Check all those settings. Everything's great, except for I no longer want it to be 6 seconds. I want it to be longer or shorter. Okay, whatever I need to do. If I need to make it longer, I can change that to 10 seconds or 30 seconds or, whatever I want. If I need it to be shorter, I just change it to shorter. The only thing that maybe could trip you up here is if I make it longer. So if I say 10 seconds, okay, and I'm making my composition longer. It doesn't look like anything changed. Look right here in the timeline, it still only goes to 6 seconds. Nothing happened over here. What happened though is if you look at our setup from the last video of understanding the timeline, this, see how this has wiggle room now? I am focused on the first 6 seconds, okay? But I can drag this out and see the whole 10 seconds now. All right, let's do that conversely. Let's go backwards. If we had 10 seconds and we're like, dude, our video is really done right here. We want it to be done at 6 seconds. And I have 10 seconds. I don't want this extra blackness just showing on the screen for that's amateur hour. So I can go to composition settings, or Control K, and shorten this to 6 seconds. So 0, 6. 6 seconds. Whoop, chopped it off. And notice nothing else changed. We didn't change our work area. We didn't change like our focus area. It's 6 seconds. Okay, great. Now let's render. Now to render something is to like cook it, make do, all the things that I set up here, all my magic, all my video voodoo here, make it a video. To do that, we need to render it. And to render, there's always a hotkey, but you can go up to composition and go to add to render queue, or Control M. Now M to me doesn't have any sort of correlation with add to render queue, so I often just go up to composition and say add to render queue. But if you've got a list of hotkeys, Control M, add to render queue. Queue is fancy non-American for get in line, okay? Like get in the queue. So if we're rendering a bunch of different videos, we might have several things in the queue, in line, okay? This is gray, which means it's already been rendered. So I'm next in line, lucky me. I try to tell my students, and I always do this, I want to look at all of my options right here. Even if I'm not going to change anything, just have it. The first setting is called render settings and defaults to best. Great, okay? So I'm going to look and see what is my quality. It's best. I can dumb it down if I want to, but I don't. It's full resolution. Here's its size. Its frame rate is 24 frames per second. I don't need to, almost never really have I ever needed to change any of this. Okay, so I just get in the habit of checking and say, yep, it's what I think it is, 1920 by 1080, 24 frames per second. Okay, great. Next one is output module. Think about what it is. Output. What am I making? So depending on what you're being asked for, if you're being asked for a QuickTime, an AVI, an MOV, whatever it is you're being asked for, a PNG sequence, this is where you pick that. It's the output module. So mine is set right now to H.264, which is like the JPEG version of a video, right? Everything can open it small. I could have JPEG sequence, TGI, a wave, right? I could do anything I want to. AVI, I can do QuickTime, which is an MOV, but I want to turn in an H.264. And an H.264 compression is going to create an MP4 file. So don't freak out if you're asked to turn in an MP4 and you're like, there is no MP4. H.264 format makes an MP4 video, okay? That's just the file type. Video output, I don't need to change. I'm working in RGB. I don't need to do anything. If I had sound, it would be in 48 megahertz or kilohertz, which is human hearing. Great. And the last one, which is pretty important here, is output 2. Where do I want to put this? So it's called practice setup render because that's what I made, and I can see where it's going. It's going into my documents folder, so I say okay. And as I probably mentioned before, you want to keep all of your files, all of your output, all of your After Effects projects, all of your source images in one folder in one place, because After Effects is always going to look at that place where you told it was. And if it's not there anymore, you saved one thing on your desktop, one thing on a jump drive, one thing somewhere else, you're going to get color bars and errors. Okay, we don't want that. So once we're done, it's not doing anything, right? So we need to remember to hit this button right here that says render. And when we render, it's going to do-do-do and listen for this wonderful noise. That is the best noise ever because that render took 2-3 seconds, but renders could take hours. So working on like your master's thesis or something, like it could be rendering for 6 hours. And you want to hear that chime because what it sounds like when it doesn't work, this is the worst sound ever. If you have a video that does not work, this is the sound you're going to hear. Hold. I'm setting it up to fail. Hold on. Hear that? That crazy goat? I'm not even kidding. That is the sound of your After Effects file render not working. And that is terrible when you've been waiting 6 hours for a render and then you hear this SOB goat in the other room. Okay? Not kidding. It's just insult to injury, but that's it. We don't ever want to hear that. You want to hear the bling. So where did this go? It output to, all right, and it's saved in my documents, and that's where my MP4 project will be. And as you can see right here, if I bring up my documents, here is practice setup render 1. I did it twice actually. So I've got 2 different MP4s. And if I want to play this MP4, I personally would play it with what's called VLC, which is just an easy little app to plug in. Because if VLC can't play it, nothing can play it. Okay, so it's over here on my other monitor, of course. Here you go. Awesome. So render early, render often. If I watch this back, this is really what it looks like, full time, everything. But if I watch it, it's like, that's a little slow. Then I might want to go back into After Effects, make some changes and render it again. So I want to render early so that I've got plenty of time to go back and make changes. But if I don't, and it's awesome, then here you go. I send that off to my client, my boss, my teacher, whatever, and say, show me the money. All right, I hope that was helpful. We'll do some more After Effects videos, getting a little bit more complicated, but always staying kind of basics. But hope you guys are great. Be well, and I'll see you next time.